Biggest compression mistakes. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, welcome back to MixFest TV. Hope you're having a great day. Before we start, please check the info box down below for my mixing courses on ProMix Academy, free plugins, special discounts and offers. And if you really want to learn how to mix and master professionally, click the join button down here, become a MixFest TV member. Access the already big and always growing library of full mixing courses start to finish, mastering courses on so many different genres and a lot more. And if the videos are helping you, please consider using the new feature, the super thanks, down here and support the channel. Let's get to the video. All right, these videos are quick list, no bullshit, straight to the point. Mistake number one, not matching levels. That's the basic, but I want to repeat it because many people fall into this mistake. When compressing, always make sure they are matching level. It's way too easy to get fooled by something that is simply louder and you don't know if it's actually better. Many compressors have auto gain, these ones don't, so you need to do it by hand, but make sure you do it. Mistake number two, too little compression. And I want to explain this one because too little compression is never a mistake per se, okay? But I feel like this happens when people are not sure about compression in general as a concept. Maybe they can't hear it that well, or if they're not sure the settings are okay. And so they go for like 1 dB because it's like, how much can I screw up if I just compress 1 dB? But if you do recognize yourself in this description, my advice is don't use compression at all. Because at the end of the day, in a full mix, 1 dB of compression somewhere, it's not a big deal. And if you set it wrong, it's still a possibility that the track most likely was better without it. If you're not confident of what you're doing and you multiply this ballparking for 20, 30 tracks, at the end of the day, your mix is gonna sound worse. So if you use compression, do it with a purpose and know what you're doing. Otherwise, stop for a second, go watch my 120 videos on compression and try to get a better idea. I have many videos on it, starting with a very basic explanation of the settings to advanced compression, okay? Number three, picking the wrong compressor, which falls again into know your tools. Not all compressors are created equal. Start with the topology of compression. Again, I have a whole series dedicated to all the topologies available, VCA, Optos, Varimuse, etc. And I have the description for each topology, for what usually we use one type instead of another, the most common settings, and also the best models for each type, both plugins and hardware. I will put the link to that series in the info box down below. If you want something punchy and colored, then you grab a Varimuse instead of an 1176. It's gonna be a uphill battle. And let me show you this quick thing that I showed in previous videos already, but we have a lot of new subscribers. So our comp by Waves, maybe some people don't know this, but it was one of the first unofficial emulations of 1176 and LA2A. These two settings, Electro and Opto, are exactly that. Electro is the 1176 FET style and Opto is the LA2A Opto style. One of the biggest difference that you can actually see is how the release, given the same settings, okay, the same timing, in this case I put it all the way slow because it's easier for you to see in the gain reduction meter, react completely different. So take a look at this. If I put it in Electro and if I put it in Opto, look how long it takes in Opto mode to go back to zero. Opto compressors have a fast release at the beginning and then they stomp on the brakes, and they have a slower release as they approach unity, as they approach zero. Electro is the opposite. It starts slower and is faster as it approaches zero, okay? Take a look. I'm gonna be switching Opto and Electro. And the release time is the same. So pick the right compressor for the job. Number five, too slow of a release. Granted that pinning material down and keeping it down is a specific effect that sometimes we want, using a too slow of a release, it still changes the envelope, but for the most part, it just lowers the volume of everything because it doesn't have enough time to release the material before the next audio event or hit passes the threshold and trigger the compressors again. We can try with this snare, for example. See, it never goes back to zero. So keep that in mind. Release settings on a compressor are vital, are one of the most important parameters, okay? Especially on the 2-bus, you want the release to be on groove, we call it, with the tracks. Number 6, this is a big one. Fail to understand internal sidechain, right? Everybody knows the external sidechain. Kick triggers the bass, okay? Internal sidechains in compressors is one of the biggest differences as to why we have different types of compressors and they all sound different and react different. Internal sidechain is how your compressor sees and hear the material that you are compressing, okay? For example, on a mix on 2 bus, it's common to have a high pass filter so the compressor doesn't react too much to the low end, okay? It's not over triggered by the low end, which is usually the biggest energy is in that range, okay? But it doesn't stop there. If we take a look at the API 2500, this is a good gym if you wanna understand better how internal sidechain works, because it's got 3 settings. So you have flat, meaning what you feed and what the compressor sees and hear and react to. We have a METH, which is basically like a tilt EQ, like this. This is how the compressor sees and hear your material. So it will react more to the mid-range and the top end and less to the low end. Don't mistake this with multi-band compressor, or even when you see a high pass filter on a compressor. The compressor is still compressing the entire signal, okay? You're still using a wide band compressor, but it's not triggered by those frequencies that you either remove or attenuate. And it's triggered more by the compressors that you boost in this case. The third setting is loud, so this would be even more exaggerated, and it will react basically almost exclusively to the very top end. So snare, hi-hats, maybe a bright vocal. Okay, we can do a quick test. And if we start compressing this mix, for this example, I'm gonna just use extreme settings so you can see the different reaction of the compressor. We start with flat and you will see the low end, the kick drum especially, will trigger the compressor a lot. Okay, it will have this pumping effect that follows the drum because the drum is what triggers the compressor the most. If we put it in METH, okay, it's still reacting to the low end a lot, but now the snare is also triggering, okay? If we go loud, it's the vocals and the snare that triggers the compressor the most. And there are other compressors that have an even more tweakable internal sidechain. Some of them have a full parametric EQ, so you can literally trigger your compressor, which is still a wide band, I want to reiterate that, with one single element inside of the mix or inside of a stem. So understand internal sidechain because that's one of the key to understand compression. Number 7, this is pretty obvious, but I want to reiterate again. Don't treat compressors plugin like hardware. They don't react like hardware. They're not as forgiving as hardware. I don't even want to go into the debate. They sound better or worse. They both sound great and they have their uses. Just don't try to use a plugin like you would use a distressor, like you would use an 1176, like a real one. Because first one, you're probably going to get disappointed. And second, it just stops you from finding another way to make that track sound like, for example, it sounds if I use a distressor, okay? Sometimes I had to mix without my hardware. I found another way. I know it's pretty obvious, but I wanna say this because sometimes people read or see a video of a big mixing engineer and whatever that is, and maybe they give the settings for a compressor or a chain of processing, and you try to do the same chain with plugins, and it doesn't sound the same. And maybe some people get discouraged. Just simply try another way to do it, okay? But just don't treat plugins as hardware. Number 8, only using one compressor. And I'm not talking about having 7 different compressors available. I'm talking about situations in which you need to do a lot of gain reduction. And whether you are on hardware, which is more forgiving, so many times one compressor will do, but even more when you use plugins, you don't want to do 20 dB of gain reduction and leaving all the load on one compressor because you're gonna have more artifacts, you're gonna have more distortion. It's better to use multiple compressors like in series, or you can do it in parallel, or you can do both. Number 9, this is a big one, trying to solve all the dynamic problems that you have with compression and not doing automation. Many of the channel members that send me the mix for review know this very, very well because probably 8 out of 10 this line is in my feedback, okay? Use more automation, you're not automating enough. You're trying to have the compressor do all the work for you and it's not working, you're not doing automation. Automation can be pre and post compression and can be of course pre and post anything. But the point is, especially on wildly dynamic material, try to do automation and try to solve those problems and even out a performance if that's what the song asks for with automation, and then use compression to change the envelope, to add character, to enhance attack or release, to make something denser. Okay, compressors are not just to even out. There's a lot more that goes into compression. Number 10, using presets, if you're on plugins, of course. I know this is bad news, and I know some people won't agree with this, but here's the truth. No song is the same. And if you rely blindly on presets, first of all, you're never gonna learn how to mix properly. And second, you're never gonna improve as a mix engineer and improve your skills. Presets can be a good starting point, although I don't even believe that that's the case, because I want my canvas white when I start doing things, okay? But I wanna start with a setting that gives me a bias, but that's just me. I just find that you will have to trick a preset to begin with, and maybe it's useful if you're mixing an album and you know that the guitars are always the same, the vocals are always the same, and you don't have to tweak that much. But aside of this, you can use presets maybe for studying and see what other engineers do, but always with a grain of salt, because 99% of the time those presets won't work for a given track, for a given mix, for a given album, okay? So try not to use presets. Number 11, using compression on everything just because. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Not everything needs compression, okay? And if everything is compressed, nothing is compressed. Especially some modern mixes are so squashed, and they are squashed everywhere. The drums are squashed, the guitars are squashed, the bass is squashed, the 808 is squashed on single channels and group, and then the mix is squashed. Those mixes usually don't sound exciting. You have to have some dynamic in it, and it must be selective. You need to try to understand what can be a little more wild dynamic in a mix, and what needs to be steady and solid. A bass, usually you want that pretty steady, okay? A synth, maybe you want that to be a little dynamic. You have strings in a song or something like that, okay? So don't use compression just because you open a compressor on every channel. I don't remember what, not having 2 or 3 go-to compressors. We'll talk about this in the biggest mixing mistake in another video, but having your go-tos is very important. First of all, because it means that you know very well those 2-3 compressors. And I say 2-3 compressors because you usually should have the main topology. So you should have a favorite opto or on the slow side, a faster punchy one like a VCA for tuba or whatever drums, and a colored fat maybe, okay? Just try to have one favorite, one go-to for each main category. This will help you because not only you will get to know those very well, it will speed up your workflow. Not every track needs your full attention for 50 minutes or 2 hours. Then you will have a reference. So if that doesn't work, you know why it doesn't work. Maybe it's a little too slow, so you grab one that is a little faster but with the same characteristics. And also stops you from fucking around while you're mixing. And if you already have clients, or one day you will have clients, there are situations in which they call you and they need a mix yesterday, okay? So you also need to be fast, and you need to have your go-tos because you know that they work no matter what. Last is not taking advantage of advanced compressor plugins. Some people always go for the hardware emulation, for the analog emulation, and some plugins have also the limitations of analog and hardware, and they don't take advantage of those advanced compressor plugins. And some are emulation with added features, but those advanced plugins that they give you, full parametric internal sidechain, those that can combine characteristics from 2 or 3 different analog emulation in one, just because they don't have the analog GUI or something. So there are some amazing plugins out there, like METH DSP makes some great advanced compressors, and we'll probably talk about this in future videos, but take advantage of what plugins do better than the hardware. And I think this is it for this video. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like. Comment down below, let me know what are your favorite compressor, and let me know if you like these types of videos. If these videos are helping you, please consider the super thanks, the new features that we have down here. Check the info box down below before you go. Subscribe if you haven't already. Stay safe. See you next time.
Hands on my neck, hands grip my throat. Lift me up, man, take control. Heart is so gone.